Welcome back to the Uprise Doctor to Doctor series. This episode, I will share tips for EHR deployment. After 30 years of EHR, I've learned a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. And the first thing I've learned is you can't move into the future if you're holding on to the past. So today I'm going to invite you to spend the next few minutes thinking about how you can improve your practice with a smart EHR deployment. But first I want to ask you to let go of old documentation and workflow constraints, at least for the next few minutes as we explore how Uprise EHR can move your practice into the future. Hello, I'm Kim Castleberry, and I'm happy to share my tips for EHR deployment and how I operate a multi-million-dollar 7,000 square foot 4-doctor practice with 13 exam rooms, a minor surgery suite, and a 15,000 square foot optical. More significantly, I do it with about a dozen full-time equivalent associates, no back office, and without an insurance department. I'm going to show you how to get your claims to the cloud without any staff, what I like to call close the exam and go home. But first, let's look at my top 10 list of tips for EHR deployment. Number 10, don't duplicate the inefficiency of paper. And number 9, stay out of the weeds and keep the big picture in mind. Number 8, develop a blueprint for deployment. And number 7, push workload to the cloud. And number 6, the website can carry the workload to the cloud. And number 5, chairside assistants are worth every penny. And number 4, get an EHR that automates coding, invoicing, and claims with fewer clicks. And number 3, make sure that you've got a true cloud EHR. And number 2, digital refraction equipment automates data entry and saves clicks. And number 1, learn how to live in a coded terminology world. John Wayne once quoted, "Life is tough. It's even tougher if you're stupid." The same can be said for deployment of EHR. And I hope to show you how to deploy EHR the smart way. I have found very few practices fully deploy their EHR to take advantages of its efficiencies. And it never ceases to amaze me how many practices just use 1 or 2 functions like demographics and recall, or maybe the scheduler. And I hope to show you how a full EHR deployment is the smartest thing you can do for your practice. You've probably heard me say, all I ever wanted in practice is an unfair advantage. And that's what a smart EHR deployment gives me, an unfair advantage. And I think it can do the same for your practice. The efficiency of our practice is totally dependent on a complete EHR deployment that respects modern office workflow and quick exam documentation that pushes data to lab orders, invoicing, and claims. Now, to do this efficiently, you must rethink and question every workflow process and exam documentation habit in your practice, from check-in to check-out. First, ask yourself, do I really want to make the changes necessary to improve efficiency and change in your practice? And if you do, then I invite you to reinvent your practice and to do a complete smart deployment of EHR. A smart deployment of EHR has to take into 2 critical considerations: workflow and exam documentation. Starting with workflow, let's look at smart EHR deployment. Reviewing every step from appointment scheduling through check-in to check-out is key to improving workflow. Dr. Ian Lane did a workflow study years ago that found the average ECP has 1,500 workflow steps versus 300 for the typical physician encounter. And any of those 1,500 steps provides an opportunity for trouble. So ECPs start off with an unfair disadvantage because of the retail component of our care. So the first thing you want to do is get rid of unnecessary or duplicate steps. Let's cut down on those 1,500 workflow steps. In fact, on a recent return visit to my dermatologist, I couldn't check in online, so I went to check in on site, and I was met with multiple forms with duplicate demographics information on every single page. I couldn't have been more frustrated and disappointed at my visit. And contrasting that to a more recent visit to UT Southwestern Medical Center with a full EHR deployment, everything was online. The information to pick my doctor, scheduling, registration, medications, and even medical history questionnaires. So that when I walked in for my appointment, I was greeted with a bottle of water instead of a clipboard full of paperwork, and I simply took a seat. It started a great healthcare experience and where I'm going to see my next dermatologist. So you want to get rid of unnecessary steps and pain points for patients as much as you can. And you want to ask what, why, and where, and when for every workflow step. What are we trying to do? And why are we doing it? Are you doing it for tradition, for habit, or really need? And where is the best place to do it? Is it in office or online, or maybe even in office online? And when is the best time? And any step that you can do electronically or online decreases office workload and cost and can make for happy patients. So you want to push as much workload as you can to the cloud. So what does this look like? Your website is the primary tool for pushing workload to the cloud. The website is the heart of technology integrated practice and where patients should be able to find everything they need for your visit. Information to select a doctor, online scheduling providing 24/7 patient access, and patients want to schedule online. Online registration is the new check-in, and many patients now want this. With electronic questionnaires that can be completed online at home or even in the office. Or online, just hand in patient a tablet or have the staff complete the questionnaires online in the office for them. Uprise supports demographics, insurance, past family social history, review of system, and lifestyle questionnaires. And they're embedded into the EHR so that you can write once and read many. No more duplicate data entry. And Uprise even supports user-defined questionnaires. Once the questionnaires have been completed, Uprise can verify benefits with just a couple of selections. And a dashboard will show red or green eligibility status icons for the day's appointments. So no more wondering if benefits have been determined. Just look at the dashboard. And HIPAA can be posted online or in the office, and e-signatures can be done and saved in the office as well, so that you can dump the forms and greet your patients again with a smile and a cup of coffee instead of a clipboard full of forms and a pen. Continuing on with things you can do on your website, secure messaging is the new telephone request. So questions, patient requests, RX refills, can be done online, reducing telephone calls. And patients have 24/7 access and like being able to connect with the telephone without the telephone hassle. And Uprise has embedded secure messaging. And this is maybe perhaps the best kept secret in EHR. You can even use it for electronic visits. And online sales has been controversial, but I think we can all agree on a couple of things. Contact lens online sales can help you compete and reduce cost, and there's plenty of third-party solutions, and you can simply put a link on your website and participate in the profits of online sales. And the same thing can be said for nutraceutical sales. Electronic notifications is a real money and time saver for the practice, so that appointment reminders and notifications can be done, product delivery notifications for glasses and contact lenses, recall notifications, and they all reduce staff resources and improve reliability. It's nearly impossible for us to get patients to answer the phone these days. And Uprise has for patient care embedded to provide these automated services, freeing your staff from these tedious tasks. Technician interviews. When online registration fails to complete questionnaires, then in our office we simply have technicians do the questionnaires during prelim. It takes just a couple of minutes and saves times and eliminates a patient pain point in the office. They hate filling out those questionnaires. This is one of my secrets that gives me an unfair advantage. Now, special testing orders really facilitate workflow in the practice and keeps patients from having to move upstream for special testing. Prior exam orders will display an Uprise to facilitate special testing before the doctor's exam. Standing orders in your practice or standing order protocols can also facilitate special testing before the doctor's exam. So that, for instance, if you have high IOPs, you go ahead and have your technicians get an OCT. If you've got flashes and floaters, have them go ahead and dilate, get Optimat with patient steering, and OCT of the macula. Or, for instance, in our practice, if we've got red eye exams, we get temperature, acuity, throat, and nodes on all patient exams, and that helps to facilitate workflow. And chair sides, perhaps the best thing I ever did, and I actually did it fairly recently, was to implement a full-time chairside assistant. They help to provide exam documentation, special testing, contact lens fitting, refraction, coding, correspondence and referrals. They close the exam. The optical handoff or the checkout can be done by them. And I can move on to the next patient, and it reduces my stress and improves my practice enjoyment. In fact, I really love practice with a chairside. Digital refraction interfaces provide seamless, accurate data transfer to the EHR. It simply saves time and many clicks, and it's absolutely worth every penny. In fact, if I could only have one thing in the exam to automate, it would be digital refraction. If you want to be efficient, you've got to go digital. Pushing optical RXs for spectacles and contact lenses to lab orders not only saves clicks, it eliminates costly and time-consuming mistakes. And this is perhaps the best example of write once and read many efficiency. Saving lab orders to quotes. If the patient is not ready to buy, it's another great feature of Uprise efficiency. So with lab order quotes, you can follow up, or patients can call back and place the orders automatically with just a keystroke. So when an order is written up, if they don't want to buy then, you just save it and it saves it as a quote. Back office automation is the key to reducing staffing resources. Exam auto-coding pushes billing data to the invoice with Uprise, and when the invoice is posted, the claim is complete with no staff intervention. The claim can be uploaded automatically, and setting up insurance companies for direct deposits helps to reduce embezzlement, provides quicker payment, and reduces bank deposit runs. Electronic remittance automatically posts payments to Uprise, and we have someone working off-site that posts our payments with just a few keystrokes and works the few claims that need to be submitted or need to be resubmitted. And we average 90% payment in 14 days. And all this is without an insurance department. Before automation, I had 3 people in my insurance department usually screwing up my claims. In fact, the last straw in my practice was when my best insurance clerk left, and I found a file full of unsubmitted claims totaling more than $100,000 over 90 days old. And I'll bet every practice has a similar story. I knew there had to be a better way, so I did a smart EHR deployment, and now I get to close the exam and go home. That does it for my workflow tips. Now let's look at exam documentation. If you're willing to change habits and the way that you're thinking about exam processing, I can show you how to go home with all your charts closed at the end of the day. What I like to call close the exam and go home, or join me sailing in the Pacific. Again, I encourage you to rethink everything about exam documentation. Most of us are working more for less with government compliance, causing more problems than it solves. So I would like to show you how you can work less for more. But I got to warn you, you're going to have to change the way you think about exam documentation. Smart Touch is the heart of Uprise EHR and provides automated documentation of findings, orders, interpretation reports, operative notes, assessment and plan, patient counseling, coding, communication. Optical prescriptions are pushed to lab orders, coding data is pushed to the invoice, and all of this with just a few severity-based ICD selections. Smart Touch is made possible with coded terminology, and living in a coded world can be a wonderful thing for your practice. And I want to show you how living in a coded world can free you from documentation, communication, and coding constraints. The only good thing I've seen come from EHR mandates is coded terminology. Government compliance has created a web of challenges, yet has given us much freedom from documentation for those of us that choose to be free. ICD-10 provides many more detailed problem codes and makes many associated findings self-evident. So selecting an ICD documents the finding and the assessment for most conditions. And SNOMED CT codes can be used to fine-tune the problem where ICD-10 is not sufficient enough. So, knowing that ICD-10 documents findings and assessment, and Smart Touch documents everything else automatically, you might want to consider over-documentation. Just quit it. And after 25 years of auditing charts for Medicare, I learned a few things about how doctors document. Most of us over-document. So you might want to quit documenting items that are self-evident, irrelevant, unnecessary, or anyone will never ever look at. It just wastes huge amounts of time. And if you want to work less for more, here's where you start. I realized with my legacy EHR I could document very detailed exam findings, and I did, mostly because I could. I was so proud of myself for doing better than paper. And as I was rethinking and designing Uprise EHR, I realized I never ever went back and reviewed those beautiful, detailed findings. Moreover, no one else wanted to see them either. What everyone did want to see was the assessment and the plan. So I quit wasting huge amounts of clicks and time and designed an EHR around coded terminology. And in the process, I reviewed CMS documentation guidelines and found the primary premise. If it's not been documented, it has not been done. And then I realized it doesn't have to be documented in multiple places or even in any specific place. The findings need only to be found in the medical record. And while the ICD codes were more detailed and a pain in the butt to learn, they also documented the exam findings in most cases. And again, SNOMED CT is a code set that defines findings, scenarios, signs, symptoms, and disorders, so they can be used to fine-tune when ICD is not specific. There are also the codes that will be displayed on patient and or provider communications when used. So, for example, right here with H43.34, 1, 2, 3, and 9, other vitreous opacities, there is an associated SNOMED code that can be used to fine-tune it, 162278001, floaters in the visual field. Same thing with other subjective visual disturbances, H53.19. Other subjective visual disturbances, again, has a SNOMED code that shows photopsia as a disorder where you can fine-tune that. And same thing with H2511, a right age-related nuclear cataract, and it doesn't need to be refined, only the severity selected. More detailed drawings or descriptions won't affect the outcome of this patient's treatment or communications. What this means is that all we have to do is pick an ICD and severity that defines the patient problem, and voila, we're done with documentations of findings and the assessment. Now, keep in mind, evidence documents are part of the exam findings. OCTs can document cup to discs, angles, macula drusen, and cupping, to name only a few. And CT can document corneal deformities, irregular astigmatism, and keratoconus, to name a few more. So don't double dip findings. You may not need disc annotations if the OCT findings correlate with your 90 diopter lens findings. And why draw out or describe macular drusen when you have the exact picture or a photo? And do you really need to describe an ulcer any better than right moderate marginal ulcer H16.041? And will describing or drawing out the cortical spoke details provide any better care than moderate age-related cortical cataract H25.011? The diabetic codes are very specific, leaving anything more than a retinal photo and an OCT superfluous. Evidence documents from screening and special tests can decrease the amount of time documenting exam findings, and it would be hard to beat an anterior segment photo and retinal photo for detailed findings. Like a legislator once told me, Kim, when you strike oil, quit drilling. And there is certainly nothing wrong with traditional documentation, but I am suggesting that there's a better way. And with Uprise, you can simply select the ICD-10 and the severity and close the exam and go home. The totally digital eye exam is the pinnacle of efficiency in our practice. The technical staff collects preliminary data and performs OPD3 wavefront, digital refraction, IOP, and Optimap. I can evaluate the vision system from the cornea to the cortex without even having to look at the patient. And in fact, I kind of kid myself, I have to remind myself to examine the patient. And there are plenty of self-evident exam findings with the digital exam evidence documents. And Uprise has interfaces for data transfer for acuities, IOP, binocular findings, cup to disc ratios, pupil, and general and constitutional data for display in discrete fields in the exam. And all EHRs apart from Uprise require manual completion of interpretation report and operative notes, wasting many clicks and much time. Uprise automates interpretation report and operative notes based on severity-based problems selected in the physical exam. Uprise even creates the order for documentation compliance. Here again, consider all of the self-evident data that is manifest on the special testing reports, and you should think twice about double dipping these findings, at least with respect to documentation of exam findings. Now, CCDs are the continuity of care documents, and they are the new auto letter. Interestingly, the government mandated format doesn't allow for detailed findings or even exam notes. What it does have is social history, medications, procedures, problems, plan, instructions, orders, and referral groups. Moreover, coded terminology is mandated: ICD-10, SNOMED CT, LOIN-C, and RX norm. All of this is designed for electronic EHR to EHR data exchange. And if you've imported one of these into your EHR, you can see what the ruckus is all about. And with Uprise, it really is a thing of beauty. This data is what the patient and other providers see and is the new legal standard and how we communicate in this new coded world that we live in. It's government mandated and HIPAA compliant. We will see increasing pressure to move to this standard CCD format. And while it's really a little bit weird to adapt to, I have found a lot of freedom in using this new standard. Uprise has built around and for these new standards, allowing quick, easy, automated communications. From my view, we're free at last from printing, faxing, licking, stamps, mailing, or even emailing communications. When I want the traditional letter, it's only a few clicks away in Uprise, and yes, you can print, PDF, or email or fax the auto letter, but I find myself using it less and less. And of course, there's always the Big Chief tab and the number 2 lead pencil or a typewriter if you can find one of those. Let's take a look at the new auto letter, the CCD, or the Continuity of Care document. Here you can see much of the demographic data at the top, the table of contents, allergies, medications, problems, procedures, encounters, the plan of care, vital signs, instructions, and reason for referrals. Again, this is the CCD, the continuity of care document, and the new auto letter. Deploying EHR can be tough, and I hope Uprise can make it easier. I also hope these tips can smooth the process. It's vital to provide strong, positive leadership, so don't let the tail wag the dog. And I'm amazed at how many providers let their staff pick the EHR the doctor is going to be stuck with long after the employee is gone. It certainly is important to respect and get the staff's input. And it's also important for them to know who is in charge and who's responsible. Developing a blueprint for a staged deployment and a time frame is the second most critical step in EHR deployment, in my view. So do it. And hire a technically oriented staff. And that's not too hard to do in today's workforce. And in fact, years ago when I went electronic, I made it clear that anyone that couldn't adapt, it would be no problem. I didn't expect everybody to, and I would help them find a job in a colleague's practice. And in fact, I had to transition a long-term associate to another local practice, and we were both happy. There is simply no substitute for good training. Put someone in charge of training. It can be done at the associate workstations, and Uprise has excellent online help and a best-in-class progress monitored learning center. Uprise even has doctor-to-doctor video tutorials online. Legacy data conversion can be a challenge, and we'll discuss it in the next slide. And once training and conversion is complete, you're ready for a trial run. Patient simulations can be helpful in smoothing out the transitions. And you want to go live in a slow month with a reduced schedule. Legacy exam data conversion to the new EHR should be considered before going live. And there really is no right or wrong way to do it, but most practices have a solution that best fits their workflow. If you're converting from paper, there's several options. The first option is you simply can scan everything into the EHR and shred everything. Or you can scan everything and shred as you go. Additionally, you could review the chart, putting any pertinent data you want into the new EHR and holding the paper for a time. Now, if you've got a legacy EHR that you're going to a new EHR, you could simply convert all of your exam PDFs to the new EHR, or you could run parallel EHRs. Again, reviewing the chart, moving any pertinent information into the new EHR. And then finally, you can do field-to-field mapping from old exams into the new exam. And Uprise allows for all of these things. Now, what you do want to keep in mind is post-payment audits, because you need to be able to go back, review your evidence documents and your exam notes, and create post-payment review documents that reflect the exam that you actually did during that time frame. In fact, what I do, I actually kept my legacy EHR active for a time period so that I could go back and produce the exact evidence documents and exam notes that I did during that exam. Now, legacy practice management data conversion really is a matter of how far back in time you want to convert. With Uprise, you can convert demographics, recall, e-documents, and schedule. And I think a good strategy is to convert all active patient demographics, and in fact, that's what I did, and all future recall, and a limited subset of e-documents, typically just driver's license and insurance documents is what we did, and all the scheduling data for 3 months in the past and, of course, into the future. My philosophy here is less is more, especially considering you'll likely have access to your legacy system around in at least some form or another, either in full active license or in PDF review or in a read-only format. Now, your strategy may depend on how you're going to maintain your legacy PM system, so you may want to use the system again in read-only mode, or you may want to keep the license active at least until you get all your accounts receivable worked on your old system. And some ECPs may want to keep the legacy system active for a couple of years for, like we said earlier, post-payment reviews. And this would be particularly important if you don't want to convert your exam data to PDFs in the new system. And that's it for today's EHR deployment tips, and I hope you'll find that your practice benefits from today's presentation, and I wish you well and good luck on your deployment. Feel free to contact me anytime at my email listed here. I'm happy to help, and I hope you join the Uprising. Thanks for watching. See you in the cloud.